the reason it's hour number 3. This show goes by way too fast. Good golly. Hey, it's great to have you for the ride today. 316-721-8255, broadcasting live out of the heart of the nation here in Wichita, Kansas. On the Big Talker, 1480 on the AM side, 102.5 on the FM side, KQAM. We are simulcasting on YouTube. We were on Facebook for the first hour. Want to try something a little bit different, and YouTube is running slow, so we're like, why not go on Facebook for a while? But we did that for the first hour. We're back at it on YouTube now. You can go to youtube.com, find KQAM Radio, which you're going to want to jump on because I'm excited to have on our next guest, as we love having him on with so many things happening in Topeka. Let's do a Kansas update.
Today
what do you say?
In Kansas.
All right, I'm ready.
Yeah, so we'll do that right here with our state representative and House Majority Leader, Mr. Dan Hawkins, hanging out on the line with us here. Dan, how are you, sir?
Fantastic, Andy. How you doing?
I am living the dream, my friend. I appreciate you coming on here. You guys have had a heck of a couple of days and a last week as you guys are wrapping up the session. But, I mean, come on, hanging out till like 2 in the morning on that Saturday morning. That was a fun time there.
Yeah, actually on Sunday morning. So we had a big day Friday. Friday, we were trying to get the budget through and went long, and of course the moderate Republicans and the Democrats refused to vote for their budget. That was their budget, Andy. It's very difficult for a conservative to vote for that budget because it's pretty big. But that's a constitutional requirement that we have to get out of there. We have to fund government, and Republicans are all about funding government properly, the core functions of government, but not a bloated budget. So the moderates and the Democrats decided they were going to hold that hostage and not allow a budget to go through until Medicaid expansion was voted on in the Senate. Well, isn't it kind of strange that you would do that in the House?
Yeah.
You need to be doing that in the Senate. If you remember correctly, the Democrats and the moderate Republicans pulled a really bad stunt several weeks ago and actually overruled the rules chair on a motion where we determined it to be a not germane situation to the bill that was at hand, which was the APRN bill, and they used it was really just Bob rule. What it is, basically what they were saying is, we know that this does not belong in this bill. We know they don't go together. It's against the rules to do this, but we don't care about rules anymore. We're just going to do it. So they passed Medicaid expansion out,
sure,
and it goes to the Senate, and then they want to try a stunt in the House and hold the budget hostage to get the Senate to do something. That doesn't work very well, Andy.
Yeah, that didn't work out too well for them. They tried it, and like usual, they stood their ground for a couple hours, and then they finally broke down and just caved in. Which, again, I kind of chuckle because, as you mentioned, why are we holding even a budget that I think is a bad budget bill? I think it's way more money than we need to be spending. I think it's a crappy
Absolutely.
bill. So we're going to hold a crappy bill hostage, and now your option is either expand Medicaid or we're going to pass this evil, terrible budget bill. Like, to me, that it was just a lose-lose situation for these guys.
I think it really was, and they didn't. I don't think they really thought through the process. What's the end game? How do we actually finish this up? I don't think they ever got that far. In fact, they were asked many times, "What's your end game?" Well, we want a Medicaid expansion vote in the Senate. Well, that's the Senate. We don't control the Senate. The
Right.
Senate controls the Senate, and they're laughing at you. They're sitting over there saying, okay, we can be here till June 15th, and then the governor can start furloughing people, and you don't get either one of the items you're asking for.
Sure.
So it's really interesting that they would try that maneuver in the House when it's in the Senate at this point. House and the Senate, believe it or not, sometimes we don't get along very well.
Sure. Yeah. Shocker, right? Yeah. You guys actually have different ideas. So let's talk about the budget. Good news is the Medicaid expansion is done. It's dead this year. It's not going to go any further. I know that there are some that are talking about, doing the research throughout the year. So that way by January 1 next year, man, you guys are ready to go with it again. What's the steps that we should be taking now to say, okay, this is going to come back again next year, and how do we prepare ourselves for that?
Well, our folks really need to. What's interesting is how loud the Medicaid expansion folks are out there. They're very loud. They're very contentious. They do things that are really not things that Republicans tend to do. Republicans are folks that really want to do what's right. They don't go out and they don't rally and they don't say bad things about people the way some of these other folks do. So I think it's time that we get a little bit louder and we let our voice be known. They've been touting the fact that Medicaid expansion, 70% of the folks out there want Medicaid expansion. But it's interesting. There's a poll recently done, but when you show people what it's going to cost and who it involves, see, people think that Medicaid expansion is taking care of more of the elderly, the infirm, the disabled. That's not true at all.
Right.
These people are people who are able-bodied adults, 19 to age 64. These are not in those other groups. If they were, they'd have Medicaid already.
Exactly.
And so when you explain to people what Medicaid expansion is and how much it's going to cost, it's a $106 million spend for the state government, which that's your money, Andy. That's my money. That's our tax dollars that we're paying. That means we're going to have an even worse situation fiscally in our budget situation when you throw a brand new entitlement program out there that we have to keep forever. It's just a bad deal. So we need to get loud. We need to let our voice be known and say, stop this nonsense.
We really do, and we had a question actually from a listener that wanted to talk about some of the budgets on there for Medicaid, but they always talk about the amount of money we could bring in from the federal government and how it's going to subsidize from the federal. That's our taxpayer money at the federal level that we need to bring back to Kansas here and take care of people, along with, by the way, the amount of surplus that we have in the state that could just go towards this. Is all of that money from coming in from the federal government and what's the surplus in the state going to compensate for this, or are we still going to go in the red in the next year or two?
We still go in the red, and we're based on the courts and what they've done to us on education spending. We've put $3.13 billion of new money into spending into education spending in the last 2 years. We put another $360 million in this budget, fired by the courts, and they still have to determine if it's going to pass muster or not. Mm-hmm. Throw in another $100 million. We're in bad shape fiscally. In 2 years, we're going to have some serious. There's going to be a serious reckoning on spending versus revenue. We'll be in the hole in 2 years. It's estimated already based on what the governor has done of about $200 million, and then the third year would be in the hole about $500 million. So a tax increase is inevitable if we continue down this road. So why wouldn't we be funding our core functions of government instead of worrying about adding a brand new program and bloating the budget even more?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're going bankrupt without even expanding it. So imagine what we do
That's
then.
Right.
And with the repealing of Obamacare at the federal level, with the individual mandate that's gone, the federal government's not even reimbursing many states for their Medicaid expansion that they've done, to the point that they said they would as well either. So they say that we are missing out on all this money. We're not going to get a whole lot of money from the federal government either, are we?
No, I think that the federal government, actually, you can go back to when Obama was in reign, and Obama said himself, he said, we cannot sustain the spending on Medicaid expansion. We already know that that's going to be too much, and in fact, it's already 50% over what they thought it was going to be on a federal basis, probably much more than that now. That's actually an old figure. At some point in time, the federal government has to say, we can't do it. Well, what they'll do is what they do on all these programs, Andy. Whenever they start them, they fund them, and then they start pulling back money. Well, where they would pull back to is what we call our FMAP. And FMAP is the match on Medicaid from the federal government and the state government. That match is currently a 55-45 match around there. So if 45 on our side, 55 on the federal side, if they were to do that to us, that means instead of $100 million a year of money, state money going to Medicaid expansion, it would be $500 million, $500 million a year going to that.
Wow.
It's unsustainable. It's just an unsustainable model, and it does not help all of the things that they say it's going to help. And they talk about the multiplier effect and all the economic benefits of it. That's not proven to be the case in other states.
Well, and that's why other states, I think it was like Kentucky that we saw mid last week that said they're actually withdrawing from their Medicaid expansion because they can't afford it anymore. They're going bankrupt.
Well, they're either going to withdraw, or they're either going to withdraw Medicaid expansion, or they're going to cut services to all of those folks that have been on it for years.
Yeah.
So you add these new folks, and then you hurt the very folks that we're really trying to help with Medicaid. It's an amazing dichotomy. It's truly interesting watching, and it's all driven. It's truly driven by the hospitals. The hospitals are the ones that's driving this narrative. They're the ones that put the money into this whole campaign to bring Medicaid expansion in. That's where it's coming from.
Well, come on, Dan. We're doing it for the people. We want to give more people on it, then cut back their services because we're caring about the people. Let's talk about the tax bill for a second. You guys came out with a secondary style. I mean, we had the SB 22 that was vetoed by the governor. We didn't get to override that one, but this one is relatively similar with doing some tax cuts and then actually trying to reduce sales tax by however much it is on food and trying to compensate for that by the online sales tax.
Right.
To try and do the segue. Talk about some of the details of that bill for the correct information, and do you think the governor will sign this one, or do you think she'll veto this one again, too?
Well, Andy, number one, we hope she signs it. So the first tax bill, Senate Bill 22, was about, I kept seeing estimates that it was about a $500 million fiscal note, meaning that, the state wouldn't get $500 million that they want. The governor wants that. This one's only about $87 million, so it's pared down a lot. It still decouples us from the federal tax system to where even if you can't itemize on the federal level, but you could on the state level, that you can go ahead and itemize. So that's a big deal for Kansas. That's something that we've been fighting for, is to give us the ability to do that.
Sure.
One of the unique things about this one is one of our new folks, Chris Frost from the Johnson County area, came up with this idea of being able to link the online sales tax revenue to buying down food sales tax. And he worked on it for weeks trying to perfect it and make it work. And he finally got there, and that's in this tax bill. So as the money comes in from online sales tax from out-of-state companies, as that happens, as it goes over, once it gets over 3% of the baseline, then all of that money will go to buy down the sales tax on food. And they estimate that could happen. We could actually possibly get to zero in 8 or 9 years on sales tax on food from that. So
wow.
that truly helps everybody. So that was a good deal. That was an excellent deal. And then they went in and they changed some of the repatriation and the GILTI provisions for businesses. And so they still get the businesses still get some effect from it, but not quite as much as they did before.
Sure.
But we need to help our business. Business is the lifeblood of our economy. And people talk about the mean multinational corporations. Well, those mean multinational corporations provide us with lots of high-paying jobs.
Sure.
How can you not want them to be successful? Because if they're successful, we're successful.
Yeah, that would make sense. You would think you'd want to reinvest in the economy and let them to actually do well. But remember, I mean, we just read the editorial piece out of the Kansas City Stars that, this is nonsensical and this is just going down the same path as Brownback and, getting those to the corporate tax breaks for rich people, and how dare we do that sort of thing.
That's just a great narrative that they continue to use. You remember when Obama was elected, how long he blamed for 4 straight years he blamed George Bush.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're seeing the same tactics here in Kansas with Laura Kelly and the Democrats. They want to talk about Sam Brownback, and Sam Brownback's been gone for a year and a half now.
Sure.
So how long are they going to keep talking about Sam Brownback? I think it's time for that narrative to leave, and let's get on with the business of the state.
Pretty much. House Majority Leader Dan Hawkins, you guys go back for the final tap-out session, I guess you could put it that way. But last question before we let you go, is there anything else that may come up? We did have some questions, if you have time, about a minute or so, to talk about the medical cannabis and why it didn't move forward this year at all. And is that something that may come back up?
I think that's something that's continually being talked about, and again, it was interesting that the medical cannabis people in Bleeding, Kansas, work. And so they came in late. There have been several other bills that have been introduced. I know there's one that's kind of modeled after Oklahoma and what they've done. And so I think you'll probably see that get some debate next year now that some of that stuff's in. We work on a 2-year cycle.
Sure.
And so just because it doesn't make it in this year doesn't mean we won't talk about it next year. So I think you'll probably see some debate on that next year. And, of course, we also saw, I don't know if you caught that, but during the waning minutes in the Senate, at like 3 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning, Senator Ty Masterson brought a motion to bring a bill out of committee that would make the Supreme Court justices, any of those appointments would have to go through Senate confirmation.
Yes.
So we'll see how that goes on Sine Die. Sine Die is Wednesday, the 29th of May at 10 a.m. is when we start.
Well, it's going to be a fun one, and hopefully we can see that go through and see where we end by the end of the session. We'll do another big recap once it's all said and done and get you back on the program then.
Absolutely. Just let me know, and I'd be glad to talk with you.
Hey, I love it. It's always a pleasure, my friend. Keep up the fight. It's Dan Hawkins, House Majority Leader. We always love having him on the program. We appreciate that very much. Got to take a break. 24 minutes past the hour. Open lines to you when we come back right here on The Voice of Reason.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hooser on the Big Talker, KQAM.